Welcome to our Social Blueprint series on how everyone has a story. I'm Tahni, and today we are going to be hearing from Nicole Eckels, co-founder and CEO of Glasshouse Fragrances, all the way from her apartment in New York. Nicole, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Tani. Nice to see you today.
Nice to see you too. I guess the first question to ask you is, how did you start Glasshouse? It's a huge company now, but it had to have some beginning somewhere. So can you tell us a bit about that story?
Well, I started Glasshouse in my kitchen in 2005 in Sydney, Australia. I had moved to Sydney from New York, and I went there for a work opportunity in sales with my son, who was 12 at the time. And I went to David Jones one day to buy a scented candle or perfume or body lotion or any of those really scented products, perfume based products, and they just didn't have anything at all. So I thought, what a great business idea. And so I decided to start the company. So I thought to myself, well, what should be the product I start with first? Because I can't do everything. And the one product I had an exceptionally difficult time finding was beautiful scented candles. They just didn't seem to exist at that time in Australia back then. So I experimented with the first batches in my kitchen. I bought different waxes, I bought different fragrances. And once I was able to sort of create a prototype and something I thought was really beautiful, I went and wrote a business plan. And then I met my investor, who's now my partner, and he gave me the seed capital, and we started the company together. Hence, co-founder.
Right. It's interesting because you say candles weren't such a huge industry back then, but now it's just exploded.
It
Everyone's
has exploded. It has exploded. And the past sort of 2, 3 years in particular during the pandemic, when a lot of people are staying home, it's gotten even much larger. The industry stats globally is it's grown 30%. And I would say in Australia, it's probably grown more like 40%. So, but what's important to remember is we were the first. So we created the scented candle category in
Mhm.
Australia, which is really exciting.
Yeah. Do you reckon you were a catalyst for the explosion that occurred since?
Well, I think that we were what we call a category leader in that we were first. We had a few years to be first, establish our distribution. And then what happened is consumers realized there was this thing they could buy that they could bring home and turn on and it would fill their home with scent. And there was a demand suddenly for these products. And when that happens, then other people start with similar like businesses too, or established businesses like, for example, Procter and Gamble or Unilever. Those products that they sell, Glade, etc., they already existed, but they weren't being sold in Australia. And they sort of waited until there was consumer demand, and then they thought, let's bring these lines in because we know we can sell them because we know consumers are looking for these sort of products. And when I started, you didn't see any of even the grocery store brands in the market. It was bizarre. And so we had something to do with being the catalyst to begin the category, yes. And and that's sort of natural. That's the way it kind of works with category or segments growing.
hmm and now you've since expanded to other lines, right?
Yes. So when I started, my vision was to be a global fragrance brand, like a really groovy Joe Malone doing cool stuff. And at the time, you know, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to create a beautiful bath and body range that sold not only candles, but also scented things like eau de parfum and body lotion and shower gel. That was always in the works, always in the plan. But I think as a growing business, we were just inundated with demand for the home fragrance products. And I just spent so much time doing that. And then once I got through that, it was like, okay, now we're ready to finally get to the other things that we make, which is why a few years ago we launched with the perfume and the body care, which has been really successful.
Could you run us through a day in the life in New York for you?
Well, it's, starting again in a new market. So even though the brand is like 17 years old here in the US, people don't know who we are. So I have very different roles running the Australian business than I do here in the US. In the US, it's all about meeting with customers, talking to retail people on the floor, training, doing trade shows. So my day consists of, it's very erratic because it's a mix of everything. I'm traveling a lot. I was just in California for 2 weeks. I'll be in Atlanta next week. A week from now, the week after that, I'm in Dallas for the week. I don't do that amount of travel when I'm in Australia. I used to. So my day consists of a lot of travel, a lot of retail visits. So that basically means going into stores, meeting with department managers, meeting with buyers, meeting with the PR agency that's going to help build brand awareness, meeting with our agency that runs our Amazon store, the agency that runs our .com store. It's meetings and visits with retailers.
Right, and that's because you're launching Glasshouse in America, but you're still trying to manage the business in Australia.
Yeah, so the business in Australia is, those hours start around 3 or 4 o'clock at night in the afternoon. And depending on whether there's a daylight savings, if there's a daylight savings, it might start slightly later. But those meetings are very much about meeting with my executive team, head of marketing, head of finance, the CFO, for example, meeting with the CTO, the technology guys, and just getting an update on key initiatives and strategies and keeping that, our core business, which is our Australian business, on track. And by day, I'm sort of moonlighting, doing the building of the business here in the US.
Right. So you're very busy, basically.
I'm very busy now. Yes. Yes.
When did you truly know that Glasshouse was going to be a success? I mean, you had the prototype, you had the business plan, but when did you actually look back and say, okay, I've done it?
So the truth is, when we made our first prototypes, before we did a large scale, before we built the factory, because we make everything ourselves, before we did any of that, we needed to do what we call now a test market, what we know now to be a test market. And I made probably only about 40, 50 products. And then we put them into a very small group of retailers. And based on the rate of sale, you can tell if you're onto something. And so during the test market phase, before we actually launched anything at all, I knew that we're probably onto something because of the fact that the shops that we had originally worked with, they bought some of the product and then sold through right away. And then what happened was the next thing we did, my next sort of big signal, which was probably the biggest, is we participated in a trade show in Sydney. And they have a few different ones, but the one that we participated in was this really high-end sort of luxury homeware gift show. And I created a booth and I had all the products in the booth and I got flowers and it all very glamorous with mirrors around. So it like kind of looked like a glamorous home. And our booth was so busy that you could not move in the booth. And for years after that, everyone else that wanted to be a distributor or a brand that was selling at the trade show alongside of us, they would ring up the organizer and say, where is Glasshouse Fragrances booth? Because I want to be next to that one, because then they would get the traffic flow. So to answer your question, the test market was massive, but the first trade show and a few subsequent after that were the real tellers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's been your biggest challenge and then your biggest triumph?
Well, I'll say that the biggest triumph has been the product themselves. Now, when I moved to Australia, I had left working in beauty in New York, which is arguably one of the biggest beauty markets on the planet. And so my bar in terms of what a product had to do and deliver was right up at the top because I had used everything. I knew all the brands from Europe, from the US, I knew them all. And so when I built Glasshouse, I built a product that in every aspect strategically was just the best. The fragrances were amazing. The way it looked was incredible. the way it performed, the value for money, all the sort of attributes you'd look at for a successful product. I knew, because I came from a market where I'd already been using these products, and I knew the competitive landscape. I knew all the players. And so I created this like hyper incredible product based on everything I loved and knew about the category. And in doing so, it's been very difficult for other competitors to come in and sort of win or steal share, because we make our own candles for start. When you make your own, you can make anything you want, as many or as little as you want. And if you're a brand, most brands will use a contract manufacturer. So they might have 5 or 6 things, and they're starting off with a small range and they're hoping to grow. But you don't grow if you can't get distribution. You don't grow if customers aren't buying your products, because you can't get your foot in the door. So not that I went out to say, oh, I'm going to stop everyone from competing. Never. That wasn't my intention. My intention was always, how do I make our customers really happy? And how do I keep them in our brand? What are the things I need to do to keep them happy so they keep coming back? And so I think that's been our greatest triumph. I think from a challenge point of view, when you grow quickly and you have more people, now we're up to 200 and something people in the business just in Australia, that poses a whole nother set of challenges, as well as being a manufacturer and a brand. We're not just focused on the way our brand looks or what we're saying about it or the names of our products or, the excitement around the animation. We're also thinking about, production flows and raw material shortages and shipping and all these other problems you usually let someone else worry about. And you say, look, I just need the product and this is the date I need it. So I would say, because of all that we do, that's been very challenging for me. And that side of the business was never one I was all really passionate about. I wanted to be more the brand and, the excitement and the song and dance and the sexiness. I didn't want to really deal with the grunny stuff. But we have, and I would say that has been also a challenge for me, but something I'm quite used to now and happy to deal with.
Well, I'd imagine over COVID that would have been especially impossible to deal with, especially because you have America and you have Australia, and they were dealing with COVID very differently.
It's true. And also, I think what made it easier, though, is Australia, at the time we launched here. So we launched here only a few months ago. The US was coming out of COVID. Australia was right back down into lockdown. But because we had seen such a spike in demand from our consumers, we really wanted to make sure we kept enough raw materials. So we got ahead of it. I have the most talented team, and we identified that this was a trend. They got ahead of it. They made sure we talked to our perfumers, we talked to our wax suppliers, we talked to our glass suppliers, and we made sure that we got the stock in, because we didn't want to let our retailers down. I mean, most of our business is wholesaling. We're not selling direct to our customers. We're selling to a retailer who then sells to our customers. And when you let those guys down, it's painful not only to the consumer, it's also painful to that retailer. So we try to not let anybody down.
And eventually painful to you, because you don't want to alienate any retailers.
That's right. And I also don't want to lose the shelf space. If you don't have something on the shelf, then something else is going to go there. The retailer doesn't leave it empty and say, oh, we'll wait for them to turn up, because it looks ugly. Mm-hmm. And that's how you lose your shelf space, which thankfully didn't happen to us. So we're very lucky.
This is more of a lighthearted question. Do you have any Israel-themed candle ideas? Putting you on the spot.
Oh, well, I am actually working on some, because I've got a trip planned to go to that area. And that's when I really want to think about it. I'm sort of the sort of person that I need to be there. I need to experience something to really get to the jewels of the idea, but it's somewhere I haven't been. I'd really, really love to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On that note, what is your connection to the Jewish community?
Well, first of all, I'm from New York and I grew up here. And so I have more Jewish friends than I can count. My grandmother is Jewish, but unfortunately I wasn't really, that part of my heritage was lost a little bit, the way that she married. And my current partner is Jewish. So I certainly enjoy all the cuisines here in New York, which I love. And it's such a beautiful religion and a beautiful people. And I've always felt a little bit cheated that I didn't get to experience that as much. But you and I, Tanya, have spoken so many times before this, and you know my connection. I love my Jewish people.
Mm-hmm. And you don't need to feel cheated. It's not too late to enjoy some challah, gefilte fish, you know.
I get that. I have that all the time. My matzo ball soup, I have it. I have my white fish salad. I've got my chopped liver. It's actually in the refrigerator right now.
There you go. There you go. Our next question is, what's going on with Glasshouse at the moment? Is there anything super exciting that you can let us in on a bit early, or maybe current?
Well, we're entering a new category soon that has never been done before by us. Other brands have done it, but not very well, in my opinion. And just like everything we do, we kind of hang back and wait till we either do it completely first, or we wait until we know we can nail it and sort of see. So in about 6 months, you're going to see something very different and new to our brand, which is very early information. I can't tell you more than that, but watch this space. And obviously, I want to be, well, not obviously, I want to be the first Australian fragrance brand that's global. There isn't any. There's beautiful fashion brands, Sass and Bide, and etc., but there aren't any Australian fragrance brands. So I want to be the first, and we're really focused on growing here in the US, making this successful. We're in Neiman Marcus, which is the most, for those of listeners that don't know, it's one of the most it is the most luxurious department store in this country. We're in Bloomingdale's, which is super hip and cool and amazing, a little bit younger. And we're opening, just like we did when we started out in Australia, in some beautiful independent retailers. So our focus is really getting that right, because we don't want to fail, and we're not going to. And that's where we're really focused. And then I have my exceptional NPD team that's always trying to come up with new ideas alongside of me to keep the brand exciting and fresh.
Sounds very exciting times.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I think our viewers will be very interested to hear about your journey. It's inspiring and it's just awesome. We all know and love Glasshouse here, so it's very special.
Well, thank you, Tahni, and thank you for taking the time and the interest to even have the interview me. So I really appreciate it. I adore you. So thank you.
Thank you.